6 o'clock. So welcome, everybody. Ms. Gleichman, would you please take the roll?
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner McCombs.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Stoneman.
Here.
Commissioner Dretsky. Commissioner Courier.
Here.
And we did hear from Mr. Dretsky. He's out of town and wasn't sure he could make it back in time.
Mr. Chairman, may I move that his absence be excused?
I second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the absence for Mr. Dretsky. All in favor, just signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, he's excused. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're on to item number 3, minutes, and we have 2 minutes to approve. First is are the minutes of 1/22/25. If you've had a chance to look those over. And I would entertain a motion.
Go ahead, Paul. You do. I'll second you. Go ahead.
Motion to accept the minutes.
I second the motion.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Ryan, seconded by Mr. Stoneman to approve the minutes of 1/22/25. Any comments, changes? Otherwise signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Or nay. Minutes of 1/22 are approved. And next are the minutes of 5/28/25.
I move to accept the minutes of 5/28/25 as is.
You got to be a little closer so we can.
I move to accept the minutes from 5/28 as
Okay.
is.
And is there a second?
I second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Courier and second by Mr. McCombs to approve 5/28/25. Any comments, changes? If not, signify by saying aye
Aye.
Aye.
or nay. Okay, those minutes are approved as well. Get this written down here. Okay. Item 4, public comment. I see that we have a letter from a member of the community, I'm assuming as a public comment. So we can look that over. And in the meantime, are there any people online?
There's no hands raised.
Okay. And nobody in the audience for public comment? Okay. Can take a look at the one that was just given to us. Okay, there are a number of things to look at here in this, so maybe we'll check that out a little more at our convenience. Yeah. Okay, number 5 is public hearings. No public hearing tonight. Number 6, other business, 2025 Comprehensive Plan and Development Regulations Update, Accessory Dwelling Units Draft Code Amendments. And we have Ms. Grage.
Good evening, everyone. Libby Grage, Planning Manager in the Planning, Community, and Economic Development Department. I'm here tonight to present some information about the proposed draft amendments to our accessory dwelling unit regulations in the Anacortes Municipal Code. Sorry, I just have to adjust things here. I can't. Okay, that's better. Okay, so I wanted to just give you a brief overview of accessory dwelling units in Anacortes. Accessory dwelling units have been addressed in the Anacortes Municipal Code since 2008. The code has been updated several times in 2016, 2019, and most recently in 2024. The list there are all of the requirements that have existed since the adoption of the first ADU ordinance in 2008. There have been changes over time, as I mentioned. An accessory dwelling unit, the definition is a second dwelling unit attached or detached from the primary residential unit on a lot. That's our current definition. And then the rest of these are where ADUs are allowed. Our code used to require public notice and comment periods for accessory dwelling units, does not anymore. One accessory dwelling unit is allowed per single-family residence, and it may be attached or detached. Our code does not allow for the ownership of a accessory dwelling unit and a primary dwelling unit to be segregated. So the ADU has to be on the same lot as the primary dwelling unit and under the same ownership as the owner of the lot. There are entry location restrictions in our current code that talk about the entry door of an ADU cannot be on the same side as the entry of the primary dwelling unit. There are off-street parking requirements. A total of 3 off-street parking spaces are required. Currently, 2 for the existing single family and 1 for the accessory dwelling unit. Our code does not require payment of impact fees or general facilities charges for accessory dwelling units. And let's see, in 2019, there were new design requirements added for accessory dwelling units, adding new roof pitch and height standards. So the more your roof was pitched, the taller the structure could get. So there was a maximum of 25 feet for a roof pitch of 6 to 12. And for less than that, the maximum is 20 feet. And then there were some other design standards that were added in 2019 as well. But none of that matters because it's all changing. Well, a lot of it. I put a little thing in here just to show that over time requirements have been removed and changed. So today in Anacortes, you could build an accessory dwelling unit in any zone on a lot with a single family residence. So that means in all of the residential zones and even in the central business district or the commercial zone where there is an existing single family residence, which we know there are, many, one could add an accessory dwelling unit to that lot. That's what our current code says. The review procedures and criteria for an accessory, for somebody wants to apply for an accessory dwelling unit and build an ADU, the process that they would go through is a type 1 administrative ministerial action. So that's just like a building permit application that goes through the regular review process and is a director decision. Building permits for accessory dwelling units are reviewed for compliance just like any other structure or residential dwelling, reviewed for compliance with building and fire codes, zoning, form and intensity standards, site access requirements, utility requirements. There are, as I mentioned, specific ADU standards in the code. And then also, they are subject to critical areas regulations and stormwater requirements, just like any other development or type of residential use. So that's the current situation. In 2023, the Washington State Legislature enacted House Bill 1337, and that new law amended the Growth Management Act to change the way that local jurisdictions can regulate accessory dwelling units. And the primary goal was to ease barriers to ADU construction, so to facilitate building of more accessory dwelling units. The bill required that jurisdictions amend their regulations to be consistent with the new requirements by a certain deadline. And at first, the deadline was 6 months past the jurisdiction's comprehensive plan periodic update deadline. So for Anacortes, that was December 31st, or it is December 31st, 2025. 6 months after that, so that would have been June 2026. More recently, there was another bill that passed that put the deadline back to December 31st, 2025. So it's constantly changing. This slide was just showing a little bit of, I put the 1337, HB 1337 in your packet, so you have that, and you could see what the legislature's findings were in enacting these new rules. As I mentioned, is mostly about easing construction for ADUs to start to address the state's housing affordability crisis. And then you can see some other findings here. The majority of residentially zoned land in many, many cities, including Anacortes, is primarily dedicated to single-family residences, and ADUs can provide a more affordable option within those zones. ADUs can start to meet the needs of growing senior population. They can be more energy efficient and incentivize reuse of existing homes and materials. And they can have the benefit of adding income for existing property owners. So anyways, I won't go through all those, but that's kind of what the bill talks about. So here is a summary of the key requirements of HB 1337. It requires the city to allow 2 accessory dwelling units on lots in zones that allow for single-family residences that meet the minimum lot size for the principal unit on the lot. So that means that in all zones where single-family residences are permitted, at least 2 ADUs have to be permitted as well. And the configurations that are allowed, the city has to allow an attached type construction, detached, combination of both, or conversions of existing structures. So that means, so within an existing structure, within a detached structure, adding on to an existing structure, or even 2 attached ADUs in a detached structure, if that makes sense. So lots of different options. And so 1337 also requires the city to no longer require owner occupancy of an accessory dwelling unit, which the city of Anacortes no longer does. Last year, I think, Planning Commission was involved in, and City Council adopted code amendments to remove that requirement. The city is not able to charge more than 50% of impact fees charged for a principal unit. And so, as I mentioned, the city does not charge impact fees for ADUs anyway, so we don't have to worry about that requirement. The city must allow accessory dwelling units of at least 1,000 square feet gross floor area. So our maximum right now in the code is 900 square feet. So can't go any lower than 1,000 square feet under the new state law. The city can't have a maximum height any lower than 24 feet in height, and has to allow accessory dwelling units to be built up to a property line if the property line is on adjacent to a public alley, which the city already does that as well. Also, the city is required to set parking requirements for ADUs that are based on distance from transit and lot size. So what HB 1337 does not do, so nothing in HB 1337 requires or authorizes the city to authorize construction of an ADU in a location where development would otherwise be restricted under other laws. So this bill doesn't require the city to approve accessory dwelling units in critical areas or, in geologically hazardous areas. It does not authorize the city to do that. And nothing in HB 1337 prohibits the city from restricting the use of ADUs for short-term rentals. And currently, short-term rentals, you may recall, are not permitted in residential or commercial areas. So the city already has that restriction in place.
Ms. Grage,
Yes.
they're not permitted unless they were licensed prior to that, whatever.
Correct.
Right.
Thank
Got
you
it.
for that clarification.
Yeah.
So nothing in 1337 prohibits the city from applying public health, safety, building code, and environmental permitting requirements to ADUs. So as I mentioned before, anything, any permitting requirements or environmental code requirements, building code requirements, we can apply all of those to an ADU. This bill doesn't authorize us to do anything differently there. Let's see, nothing in HB 1337 prohibits the city from applying generally applicable development regulations to the construction of an ADU, except when it would be contrary to the requirements of the bill. So that's saying that the city can apply development regulations for maximum lot coverage, minimum landscaping requirements, et cetera, anything else that would be applicable to other uses, residential uses. Nothing prohibits the city from prohibiting construction of ADUs on lots that are not connected to or served by public sewers. And nothing prohibits the city from prohibiting or restricting ADUs in residential zones with a density of at least one dwelling unit per acre or less that are within areas designated as wetlands or other types of critical areas. This is a lot of words, so I think I'm going to skip to the actual draft code that I put in your packet, if that would be helpful to just move through that. let's see.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Mills?
could I request that as we go through this language, if there are elements that are not required by the state law that we have putting in? What I'm trying to do is that if the state law, it's good for us to understand it, but if we don't really have any say over that, then we can just understand it and move on. If there's things that we're putting in to expand upon the state law or to include our interpretations, if you could highlight those as you go through, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Yes, I will try to do that. So I also just wanted to note that when you see this again, we'll have it combined in with all of the rest of the proposed amendments that we've been working with, that big document that has all of the Housing Action Plan recommended amendments in it. So we just pulled this out for ADUs just to make it more manageable this time around, but ultimately the revisions will go into that larger package for you. Okay, so the way that this is set up is the blue boxes are explanations. This is section 1947-030 of the Anacortes Municipal Code. And the black text is existing, green underline is addition, and red strike through is delete. And so you can see a lot of green here. And these are definitions from the statute that are proposed to be added into these regulations. So a new definition for accessory dwelling unit, definition for attached accessory dwelling unit. And on this one, I'll point out that there is the second sentence here. Whoops. Oh, PDFs. The second sentence here was an addition or proposed addition to the state language by staff, just to make sure that it was clear that attaching an accessory dwelling unit with a breezeway does not create a situation where it would meet the definition for an attached accessory dwelling unit. I might need your help explaining that, John. Sorry.
So accessory dwelling units currently have a different height restriction than the rest of the house. So in some massing situations, it might be beneficial to people trying to skirt around the rules by building a detached ADU, but then, connecting it with like a breezeway or some sort of covered roof, just for the purpose of trying to pass it by as an attached ADU, and to clarify, to prevent that sort of go around and confusion, and we chose to put this in to avoid that circumstance in the past, and that's happened several times. So,
Even though it doesn't really matter with the new state law whether it's attached or detached.
it matters for height, because a detached ADU can only be 25 feet, but the regular house can be up to 35 feet. So, for example, if they build a garage on the back, a separate ADU and garage, and they want it to be 35 feet, they can't do that by just attaching a breezeway. If they fully attach it to the house and integrate it into the house, then it's an addition and it would be part of the house. But we didn't want people to get, tricky and build a long breezeway and kind of skirt the rules for that are meant to address massing.
Thanks.
Thank you. So the other definitions that are proposed to be added here are a definition for dwelling unit, gross floor area, and principal unit, which I've used several times already and realized I didn't define. So the principal unit means a single-family housing unit, duplex, triplex, townhouse, or other housing unit located on the same lot as an accessory dwelling unit. Are there any questions about any of the definitions or terms? Okay. So the purpose statements are proposed to be deleted. And Section C addresses standards and criteria, and this is where we've added in some language to address the requirement to allow up to two, or to allow at least two accessory dwelling units located on all lots that are located within a, let me start over. Up to 2 ADUs are allowed on all lots that are located in all zones that allow for single-family homes. And they are allowed in the configurations listed A, B, C. A, B, C. So 1 attached ADU and 1 detached ADU, 2 attached ADUs, or 2 detached ADUs, which may be comprised of either 1 or 2 detached structures. So we made a revision to strike out the subdivision, number 3 subdivision section that talks about ADUs not being subdivided or otherwise segregated in ownership from the principal dwelling unit, because the state law says that we can't disallow those other forms of ownership just because a structure was originally built as an accessory dwelling unit. Put the maximum accessory dwelling unit size, bumped that up to 1,000 square feet, consistent with the state law.
Quick question on that. So the state, if I'm right, and correct me if I'm wrong, so the state says it has to be at least 1,000 square feet, or we have to allow at least 1,000 square feet. So according to the state, it could be 2,500 foot ADU.
No, I always struggle with how to say this correctly, but we can't set a maximum size for an ADU that is any less than 1,000 square feet. So
Right.
an ADU could be 500 square feet, could be less than that. Just can't, the city can't establish a maximum size of any less than 1,000 square feet.
Right.
Can you say that differently to help me?
I think what you're getting at is, if we don't set a 1,000 square foot limit, ADUs could be allowed up to any size. There's no state requirement saying that the ADUs are a maximum size.
Right.
Besides, the definition does the definition say it's smaller than the primary unit? But is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think, at least I think, my understanding is the state says the minimum size is 1,000 square feet, and we are saying in Anacortes, the maximum size is 1,000 square feet.
No, they don't say the minimum size is 1,000. They say we can't, no city or jurisdiction can restrict an ADU to be any smaller than 1,000 square feet.
We couldn't have a restriction at 800 square feet, but we can set the restriction at 1,000.
Okay, I think we're all saying the same thing.
I don't know why I have such trouble, with that one. But the current maximum, I'm sorry.
Not to exceed 1,000 square feet.
For us,
Yeah, it's the state's minimum maximum.
for the state. You mean they're saying that we have to follow the law? Is that what you're saying?
Here's what it says, straight from the law. Maybe this will help, I don't know. It says the city or county may not establish a maximum gross floor area requirement for accessory dwelling units that is less than 1,000 square feet.
Yeah,
Is that, okay.
yeah.
So we can't set it at 900, but we could set it at 9,000.
Right.
But
Got
we're
it.
not going to. We're going to set it at 1,000.
Got it.
Helps keep it in the affordability range.
We got that one, okay. I'm sorry, I lost my spot.
You're on 5.
Thank you. Okay, so here is the section on maximum height. So you'll see in the red strike through, we used to have, or well, we have right now, but the existing regulations have kind of this a little bit complicated requirement for roof pitch. If your roof pitch is less than 6 to 12, you only get 20-foot maximum height. If it's more than 6 to 12, you can go up to 25 feet. And then there is also this requirement for a daylight plane setback, which requires I don't know if I should explain this because we're proposing to get rid of it, but it basically requires the building to be constructed so that no portion of it intersects with this daylight plane. So it's a 45-degree setback plane that is established at the minimum setback for the zone, which is 5 feet, up to 15 feet, and then over 45 degrees. So the intent of this was to try to maintain privacy on adjacent lots when an accessory dwelling unit is built in the backyard.
For what it's worth, that particular requirement was challenging to explain, and it proved to be challenging for applicants to apply because it was tough for them to understand. We're proposing to eliminate it because the state law says we can't require any different aesthetic or massing, that it doesn't apply to the primary unit. We don't have anything that applies to the primary unit like this, so we have to scratch this anyway. So it's not necessarily bad because it was really hard to apply in practicality.
All right, so the proposal is to set the maximum height for a detached accessory dwelling unit at 25 feet. The state law says you can't go any lower than a maximum height of 24. And so we're proposing 25 just because that's what the tallest was allowed with the existing regulations. So just to match what is already permitted. And then, as John explained earlier, attached ADUs. So if the ADU is within an existing structure or attached to it, then it is subject to the maximum building height for the primary or the principal unit.
Just a quick return to 5A, the minimum lot size, just for all of us to be thinking about that, because I think we've got some proposals to reduce lot sizes in different zones, and it would be good to think about that in terms of a house and 2 ADUs.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I skipped right over that.
That's okay.
So yes, the minimum lot size. So a lot with an ADU must meet the minimum lot size for the principal unit. So if someone wants to put an accessory dwelling unit on a lot with an existing single family, then the lot has to be at least large enough to meet that minimum lot size for the single family, and same for a duplex or a triplex or townhomes. Did that make sense?
So if a lot, let's say, is 7,500 square feet, and we're thinking about making that 6,000 square feet, then I think we should think with ADU possibilities in mind. That's all I'm saying.
Well, there's also the way that we configure an ADU. Just on that thought, for some of the smaller lots, when we are configuring ADUs, it can be a single building with 2 ADUs in it. Like if it was a garage with the ADU above it, later the garage is converted to an occupied space, but used as a second ADU.
Yeah.
So then they would get the 2 with the square footage, with the footage restrictions of the lot. So we wouldn't be limiting them, they just have to get smarter.
Yeah, I'm just saying we should be thinking about that as we're thinking about minimizing lot sizes.
Thank you. Okay, so moving into the minimum setback requirements. ADUs must comply with minimum setbacks required for the principal unit, except that, and then there's an exception here for detached accessory dwelling units may be sited up to a lot line if the lot line abuts a public alley, unless the city routinely plows snow on the public alley, which I don't think that's a thing right now, but could be in the future. And then this is added language to be consistent with what our current requirements are for a setback to a structure on the alley when the garage, if it contains a garage or a carport, there needs to be a setback from the alley property line to allow for a vehicle to maneuver into the garage or carport. So this language here is maintaining that 10-foot setback from garage or carport.
On that one, Libby, does it apply to garages where the garage door or entering the garage would be parallel to the alley, and then they would get the 0 setback? Since
If it enters parallel to the alley, then no, the ADU could still be built up to the lot line.
Thank you.
Can we revisit that?
Revisit it?
So if the garage doors are on the side of the building, not along the alley, but on the side of the building, then the garage, then the ADU can be all the way up to the property line. If the vehicular access is from directly from the alley, then
Perpendicular.
it needs to be pushed back 10 feet. And that's just to allow room to maneuver, because in a typical 16-foot alley, it's hard to turn into a garage without that garage being backed up a little. But if you come in from the side and there's room to maneuver on that side, then you can have the ADU all the way up to the lot line.
Thank you.
At least that's what we were trying to say. If that's not what it says, double check us.
Okay, I'm going to move on. So down here, we have information about an ADU or 2 ADUs would still be subject to the maximum lot coverage that applies to the lot in a particular zone, and also the minimum landscaped area. So that means whatever existing development, if it's a single family or duplex or triplex, plus the ADUs, can't exceed the maximum lot coverage. And there still needs to be enough space on the lot to meet the minimum landscaping requirement, which is usually not very much. I think it's like 20% in most residential zones. For parking, the way that the code reads right now is that a minimum of 3 parking spaces must be provided. And that's 2 for the principal single-family home, because our code only allows ADUs with one single-family home right now. And then 1 for the accessory dwelling unit. And it allows for on-street parking if it's available abutting the lot to count as that parking space for the accessory dwelling unit. And this proposes to retain that but it's just addressing the parking space requirement for the ADU. So 1 off-street parking space is required per ADU, and where paved on-street parking meeting city standards is available abutting the lot, that parking may satisfy the ADU parking requirements. Are there any questions about that one? Parking. This number 8, ADUs are prohibited on properties that are not served by sewer, which is
Not in our city.
not very much of the city. Most of the city is served by sewer. Oops. And then finally, ADUs are subject to the public health, safety, building code, and environmental permitting requirements that are applicable to the principal unit, unless specifically stated otherwise in this section. So just saying that they're subject to all the same requirements as the principal unit, unless it's modified within this particular section. That's the end. Is there anything that we want to go back to or touch on? Questions?
I think pretty straightforward.
Good.
I thought there was something that talked about the UGA.
Yeah, there is. So these, in RCW 3670A 681, talks about the city or county must allow at least 2 accessory dwelling units on lots that are located in all zoning districts within an urban growth area that allow for single-family homes. So this section would not be applicable if it were being applied or in areas that are outside of an urban growth area. But all of Anacortes is in an urban growth area.
Right. So, questions, comments from the commissioners? Mr. McCombs.
I just have a question, just to clarify, the way I understand this. So the city is required that they allow at least, or up to 2 ADUs, right? If the lot.
At least 2.
At least 2. But you're also restricted by, I think towards the very end, we talked about the maximum lot coverage. So, which in most zones is about 60% or 50%? Is that right?
I think it's ranges from 40 to 50%.
Okay, so if it's, so if the primary home is already at 50% and you were gonna add 2, and that's the limit, then my understanding is that you would not be able to allow 2 ADUs that would be detached. Is that correct? Is that a correct
That-
interpretation?
That's the way I would see it, yes.
Okay. My question, thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask a question that Mr. Dretsky always asks. So this is a Dretsky question. If you are living in a place with HOA, what prevails? The HOA rules or the city law or state law?
Well, the city only enforces the city's regulations, and it would be a private matter between the HOA and the property owner if there were private covenants restricting the development of an ADU. So if it were allowed under city code, then the city would have to allow it and issue a permit for it. And then it would be between the private property owner and the HOA to take it any farther than that.
Which means that the HOA would prevail because a property owner signs a covenant with the HOA. So whatever the HOA says, if the city allowed it and the HOA said nope, then they would not be able to build, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that's correct.
Yeah. I want to say, overall, I'm really in favor of ADUs because I think they really can solve a lot of problems. The issue will always be between solving housing issues by adding more density or by adding more sprawl. And this one adds more density in a way that I think would be more amenable to many neighborhoods rather than, a 5-story apartment building. So overall, I'm sad that the state takes away local control of things like this, but I understand it. So that's my own soapbox.
Getting back to lot coverage, they're between 35% lot coverage and 50% lot coverage.
Thank you.
Okay, so I know that this is not an action item tonight. So I guess,
Yeah, I would love to, if there's any additional information that the Planning Commission would like me to bring back to help you, later on, make a recommendation on this topic, we're happy to do that. But if you don't, then we will just integrate these proposed changes into that larger document and bring that back when it's ready.
Commissioners, Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You made mention that we don't currently charge impact fees for ADUs. In the real world, they have an impact. And if we're expecting an expansion of the number of ADUs in the coming years, is that, and maybe this is beyond the scope of this commission, is that something that the city is looking at? Or if not, do they need to look at it?
Well, especially with our sewers. We have
Not,
some aging sewers around here,
we're not looking at it at the moment.
but we need an intersection.
It could be something that is looked at in the future, yes.
Yeah, Rick, I'd like to see us keep that in mind as a citizen, if not as a commissioner, since that's probably beyond our scope.
Yeah.
And I did have one other thing. There was a reference made in your opening comments about something was regulated or differentiated based upon where it stood relative to public transit. Could you direct me to the language and the changes we're making that might deal with that?
Yes, I knew someone was going to ask about that because I didn't put that definition in.
Well, one of my curiosities there is that public transit routes are subject to change.
Yes, And I will try to find the definition here, but I remember looking at that and it not being applicable in Anacortes.
I believe the term is major transit stop, and then there's a definition in the RCW somewhere that talks about, that defines what that is, and it generally doesn't apply to anywhere outside of Kings, Snohomish counties. Maybe in Olympia, but in Vancouver, but not generally in the rest of the state. But there it is. She found it.
Yeah. Major transit stop means a stop on a high-capacity transportation system, funded or expanded under those provisions. Commuter rail stops, stops on a fixed guideway system, rapid transit routes, stops for a bus or other transit mode providing actual fixed route service at intervals of at least 15 minutes for at least 5 hours during the peak hours of operation. We don't have any of that right now.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Grage.
Thank you.
Always appreciate your work. And now, number 7, Planning Department update. Mr. Coleman.
All right, so what I like to use these planning department updates for is to let you know where things are at that the Planning Commission has touched. So the shoreline development permit that the Planning Commission recommended approval of at its last meeting on May 28th, which was for the Curtis Wharf. That went to the City Council on Monday night, and they approved it as you recommended. So good job. They just took your recommendation and ran with it. That same night, I gave a check-in to the council presentation about where we're at with the comp plan process. We didn't get into details of what changes were made, or even any of the content of the comp plan changes so far, as much as I just gave a presentation explaining the process so far and where we're at, the next steps. And so I guess this is really more for people that are watching this meeting and they're like, oh, there's some other information. Maybe you could watch that City Council meeting. But I think the Planning Commission is probably well aware of where we are with the comp plan update. If not, let me know, and we're happy to help you out. Friday, there was a North Star Symposium, and there was a couple of Planning Commission members there and several City Council members, and it was a day-long workshop about housing and homeless services and behavioral health, with several breakout sessions with a couple of keynote speakers, one talking more about about, I don't know, maybe you can help me out with what she was talking about is more the human aspect of homelessness and just and hard times that people go through and connections with other people. And then there was another keynote speaker was about housing and its nexus to homelessness. And so if you have any questions, we're happy to fill you in about what we heard. It was a pretty enlightening event. And moving on from that, we're things going on in the planning department. We're getting very close to completing 2 studies. One, Sharp's Corner study, which is a study of the city-owned land to see if there's any capacity for affordable housing on that land. The city could provide it in partnership with another agency or a low-income housing provider of some sort. And so we're studying, what can the land hold based on what we know about the land and easements, and we've done some financial analysis of feasibility, and so that'll be coming out. hopefully in the next few weeks. And we're also just about working on final drafts of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, which was a document that was based largely on surveys about economic development and desires of the community. I know that you've probably all were involved in taking that survey or participating in one of the 2 workshops that we had. And so the findings are getting ready to come out. We'll let you know when they're out. And that is our Planning Department update for today.
Thank you very much. Commissioners that attended the North Star Symposium, anybody want to weigh in what you learned, what it was like?
It was a lot of information, but it was really good.
To the mic.
I think one of the big takeaways, and Mike was there as well, is that the correlation was one of the keynotes was that the correlation between homelessness and housing is really clearly defined. Although there's a lot of other elements where there is more housing and there is less homelessness, and that held consistent across the data across the country, regardless of poverty levels, regardless of a multitude of other factors. That was a key component. And so a lot of it centered around that. I think the sessions I was at primarily dealt with housing code, dealt with stuff like we're talking about with middle housing, how to create density, how to create more housing to make that something that fits in with city communities and cities in a way that is more palatable than I think what a lot of people think that might look like, and trying to paint that picture for what that could look like. And those are some of the big takeaways for me, was just the correlation between more housing, less homelessness, regardless of the other factors, and they are all contributors. I don't know, Mike, what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I went into the meeting kind of feeling an obligation to attend, and my expectations were pretty low. And it was a fantastic meeting. It was well worth avoiding the golf course on a beautiful day. I particularly enjoyed the 2 keynote speakers. They were kind of the 2 ends of the spectrum. The morning keynote speaker, to me, was more of a touchy-feely, emotional approach to the situation, whereas the afternoon keynote speaker was much more data-driven. And I was inspired by both of them, and in the case of the more data-driven one, exposing my approach to these sorts of things, I've written an email to the speaker subsequent to the meeting with a series of questions, and hoping to exchange some ideas about some of the regression analysis that he did. Everything seemed to be single variable, and I think there's some opportunities to take a look on some multivariable approaches, but beyond the scope of us here in Anacortes, but I was inspired by that. The other takeaway was I was inspired to expand my reading. The book that he said is the Bible on middle housing, I happened to have acquired a year ago and took it on a cruise. So I need to probably read it again, because on cruises, a lot of food and alcohol is involved while you're reading. The speaker also had reference to the book that he published with all the data-driven analysis and so I've got that in my purchase basket with Amazon to have a look at that. I was kind of waiting to see how he answered my questions before I ordered that. So I felt like I came away with some homework, but also an expanded appreciation for the problem and the challenges of matching supply and demand on housing. So, by any chance, I was sat there thinking, I wish this was being videotaped so that others on the commission and the public could go through and see it, but I didn't see any videography around, so I don't think it was.
I don't think it was, but there's a pretty good chance that one of his speeches or presentations are available on the internet. The book that Commissioner Mills is referring to is called Homelessness is a Housing Problem. And to add what Commissioner Courier was saying, not only did he find a correlation between a lack of housing and homelessness, a much stronger correlation to housing affordability. So where housing is expensive is where the problems start first. And that's why, I mean, according to his data, that's why, Los Angeles and San Francisco and Boston, which were expensive cities to live in, and then Seattle has now caught up. Those are where the most acute homelessness problems are. Whereas other cities that might have a shortage of housing, but their housing might be more affordable, they're not quite having the same problems, but everybody is potentially heading in the same direction. And I think one of the takeaways was we're not doomed. We just need to create more affordable housing, and that will get us potentially get us out of this problem. One thing that struck me in his presentation was he said of the 100 cities that he spoke at, Skagit County has the lowest vacancy rate of any place he's been, at consistently hovering at 1% for well over 5 years, maybe longer. And he said that is just staggeringly low, and the red light is blinking that we are headed for a real crisis if we don't do something soon.
Yeah, he actually seemed quite shocked. It sounded like he looked it up within the last few days in preparation for attending, and was quite shocked or surprised by that. It obviously made an impression on him.
Yeah. So he's a professor at UW. So he lives in Seattle, so he has local connections, but he was previously a
he's an investment banker. In fact, I may have interviewed him at Northwestern School of Management because he was a graduate student there at a time I was recruiting people for our financial development program at the company I worked for. And I was going to Northwestern once a year during that period that he would have been in grad school.
So he has a wide breadth of experience that is not homelessness focused in the long run. So it was actually kind of interesting that, he just started, he's a data person and came across this problem and applied his background knowledge to that and came up with some startling information.
Well, very good. Thank you, and thank you, commissioners, for attending and letting us know. Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Anything else for the good of the order? I was trying for a record. It's not a record. Okay.